Let's talk about one of the most overlooked but deeply magnetic traits a man can embody: integrity backed by purpose. Now, when people hear the word integrity, they often think of someone who simply follows the rules, who does the right thing even when no one's watching. And that's part of it, but let's go deeper. True integrity isn't just about morality, it's about internal alignment. It's when what a man thinks, says, and does are in harmony. And that kind of alignment creates something very rare in today's world: trust. Women don't just respect men with integrity, they feel it. It's almost instinctive. Why? Because a man who is internally consistent makes others feel safe. Not in a patronizing, protective way, but in an emotional and psychological sense. You don't have to second guess where he stands. He's not shifting with the wind. He's not sweet one moment and silent the next. His words are backed by action, and his presence carries weight, not because he's loud, but because he's solid. And when you pair that integrity with purpose, you get something powerful. You get a man who is not only grounded, but also moving in a clear direction. Purpose gives a man structure. It channels his energy, his time, his attention, and women can sense when a man is deeply rooted in something larger than himself. It doesn't have to be some grand mission to save the world. It can be building a business, mentoring others, being an exceptional father, creating art. What matters is that it's real, that it's pursued with intention. Because a man with purpose doesn't need to chase validation. He creates it. He doesn't get caught up in games, in superficial power plays, or in trying to impress. His life speaks for itself. And in a world filled with noise and posturing, that quiet certainty stands out. Now, let's add a layer of psychology to this. Women are wired, biologically and emotionally, to assess stability. It's not just about financial or physical security, though those can be part of it. It's about psychological stability. Women respect a man whose presence brings clarity, not confusion, who doesn't just know what he wants, but lives in alignment with that desire. That consistency isn't just attractive, it's deeply reassuring. Especially in a time where so many people wear masks, where character is often traded for charm, a man who stands in his truth becomes rare, and therefore valuable. That's why his image is a savior to them in the end. And this kind of man doesn't need to dominate anyone to feel strong. He doesn't seek control over others, he seeks control over himself. That's what makes him a leader, even if he never asks for the title. That's why women look up to him, not out of fear or dependence, but out of respect. Because he's not trying to be impressive, he simply is. Now, this doesn't mean he's perfect. In fact, his imperfections are part of the respect he commands, because he owns them. He doesn't pretend. He doesn't shift blame. He takes responsibility, learns, adjusts, and moves forward. And let me tell you, that kind of honesty, it hits different. It cuts through the nonsense. It creates intimacy without even trying. You see, women aren't looking for men who have all the answers. They're drawn to men who are asking the right questions and who are living in pursuit of something meaningful, because that pursuit shapes a man. It deepens him. It gives his energy direction. And in that direction, women don't just see ambition, they see leadership. They see potential. They see someone who can build not just a life, but a future. And maybe that's the deepest point here. Purpose gives a man vision, and vision is contagious. When a woman meets a man who knows where he's going, who's building from the inside out, it invites her to trust, not just him, but what she could build with him. That's what earns respect. That's what inspires loyalty. So if you're wondering what kind of men women respect the most, it's not the loudest guy in the room. It's not the one with the flashiest life or the most charming words. It's the man who lives his truth quietly and powerfully. The man who moves with clarity, who acts with intention, and who shows up as the same person day after day. Integrity isn't just admirable, it's magnetic. And purpose, isn't just personal, it's relational. A man who has both doesn't need to ask for respect. He embodies it. And that right there is unforgettable. There's something we need to unpack when it comes to strength. Because for a long time, strength in men has been sold as this one-dimensional stoic image. Unshakable, unemotional, unaffected. But let's get honest. That version of masculinity is not only outdated, it's unsustainable. And women, especially women who are emotionally mature, see right through it. The kind of men women truly respect aren't the ones who pretend they don't feel. They're the ones who feel deeply but remain anchored. It's not about emotional suppression. It's about emotional mastery. Let me explain what that looks like. A man with emotional strength isn't ruled by his emotions, but he's not afraid of them either. He doesn't shut down when things get uncomfortable. He doesn't deflect vulnerability with jokes, anger, or silence. Instead, he faces himself. He's aware of what's going on inside, and he's willing to confront it. That self-awareness, it's powerful because it creates stability. It means you're not walking on eggshells around him. You're not guessing whether he's going to withdraw, explode, or ghost. You're dealing with someone who has internal control. And that's the kind of strength that lasts. And here's the key. Emotional strength is not weakness in disguise. It doesn't make a man soft. It makes him formidable. Because it takes far more courage to open up than it does to shut down. It takes strength to be honest, especially when that honesty exposes something raw. But that's exactly what builds respect. When a man is emotionally honest, but still grounded, it shows maturity. It shows he's done the work. Now let's talk about the psychology of it. Women are intuitive. Whether consciously or not, they read emotional cues constantly. So when a man is emotionally stunted or reactive, it signals something deeper, instability. It creates a kind of internal dissonance. He may say one thing, but his tone, his body language, his energy betrays something else. And that inconsistency breaks trust. Not necessarily because he's lying, but because he hasn't mastered himself. But a man who's emotionally strong, he brings clarity. His presence calms the room, not by force, but by regulation. He can express without exploding. He can disagree without disrespecting. He can feel without losing his center. And that's not just attractive, it's reassuring. Because it tells a woman, this is a man who can handle the weight of life without dropping the people around him. And let's be honest, life will test you. It will throw uncertainty, failure, disappointment. What women pay attention to is how you respond to those tests. Do you collapse? Do you lash out? Or do you feel it, face it, and keep moving? Emotional strength isn't about never breaking. It's about how you rebuild. That resilience, that composure, it sends a message. I've been through fire and I'm still standing. You're safe here. And safety, emotional safety, not just physical, is what earns deep respect. Now, I want to be clear. Emotional strength doesn't mean overexposing every feeling to everyone. It means knowing when to open up and with whom. It means being intentional. A man who knows his emotional landscape doesn't burden others with it. He manages it. That's the difference between dumping and sharing. And it's why women respect emotionally intelligent men. Not because they own their inner world and invite connection from a place of balance. Philosophically, this is about integration. Masculine energy is not the absence of emotion, it's the container for it. A strong man creates space for his own emotions without being overtaken by them. He can sit with grief, with anger, with fear, and not let it define him. And that kind of presence, it gives others permission to be real too. It sets the emotional tone for the relationship. And women pick up on that immediately. The truth is, women don't want a robot. They want a man who can be a mountain in the storm, who can feel the storm but not collapse under it, who can hold space for her without needing to dominate it, who can remain clear, calm, and kind, even when life is not. Because at the end of the day, emotional strength is not about appearing tough, it's about being rooted. And a man who's rooted in himself cannot be shaken by the world. That's the man women respect, not because he's invulnerable, but because he's real and still unshaken. And that kind of strength, it speaks louder than any performance ever could. There's a kind of quiet power that doesn't announce itself, but when it enters the room, you feel it. It's not loud. It doesn't need to dominate the conversation. It doesn't seek attention, but it changes the energy. And that's the kind of presence that commands respect, not by demand, but by essence. There's a profound difference between demanding respect and embodying it. A man who demands respect is often trying to compensate for something, trying to impose authority from the outside in. But respect that lasts, respect that matters, can only flow from the inside out. You don't have to raise your voice. You don't have to puff your chest. When who you are is aligned with truth, discipline, and self-respect, others feel it, especially women. Because here's the truth. Women watch far more than they listen. They pick up on nuance, how you carry yourself, how you treat people when there's nothing to gain, how you respond when your ego is challenged. And no matter how polished your words are, if your energy communicates insecurity or entitlement, it shows, it leaks through. Women don't respect men who seek control over others to feel powerful. They respect men who are in control of themselves. Because that's real strength. Psychologically, it comes down to what we call internal versus external validation. Men who are always trying to prove something to others are operating from a place of external validation. They're trapped in performance, constantly reacting to how they're being perceived rather than standing firm in who they are. And that energy is exhausting, both for them and the people around them. It's unstable. It feels like something's always just beneath the surface, ready to erupt or collapse. But when a man is anchored in internal validation, everything changes. He's not looking for applause. He's not bending to please or posturing to intimidate. He's simply present, present with himself, present with others. Present in a way that doesn't seek approval because his actions are already aligned with his own standards. And that kind of man, he earns respect without saying a word. You see, real confidence isn't a show. It's a state of being. And women don't respond to bravado. They respond to congruence. When what a man says matches how he lives, when his tone matches his energy, when his boundaries are clear but not aggressive, that's when respect happens naturally, not forced, not fabricated, just felt. Philosophically, it's the difference between power and force. Force requires effort. It pushes, it controls. But power? True power is effortless. It doesn't need to control others because it already governs itself. And women are drawn to that kind of centeredness, not because they want to be controlled by it, but because it creates stability, safety, and certainty in a world that often lacks all three. Let's talk about boundaries for a moment, because this is one of the clearest markers of a man who commands respect. He doesn't tolerate disrespect, not because he's confrontational, but because he values himself enough not to entertain chaos. He doesn't need to explain himself repeatedly. He doesn't chase. He doesn't beg. He simply removes himself from situations and people that don't align with his standard. And the silence of his absence says more than any argument could. And it's not just in romantic relationships. The same principle applies in friendships, work, family. A man who commands respect does so across all areas of life because it's who he is, not what he performs. You can't compartmentalize character, and women pay close attention to this. How do you treat the waiter? How do you respond when someone disagrees with you? How do you hold your ground without losing your grace? Those small moments, those micro decisions, build a man's aura. And that aura either commands respect or drains it. So if you want to be the kind of man women truly respect, don't chase it. Don't posture. Don't perform. Build it from the inside. Clarify your values. Live them consistently. Own your decisions. Set your boundaries quietly. And let your presence speak for itself. Because the truth is, the loudest man in the room is rarely the one in control. Real authority doesn't need a stage. It radiates from within. And when you become the kind of man who doesn't ask for respect but simply embodies it, you'll find you don't need to convince anyone. The world and the women in it will respond to what you already know. Respect is not something you demand. It's something you become. There's a point every man reaches in his life when he has to ask himself a simple but confronting question. Am I taking full responsibility for the life I'm living? Not in theory, not in the way that sounds good on paper, but in practice, day to day, moment to moment. Because here's the truth most people avoid, especially in a culture that's become addicted to blame. Nothing commands more respect than a man who owns his life fully, without excuses, without theatrics, without needing applause for doing what needs to be done. Women don't respect perfection. They respect accountability. There's a huge difference. A man who takes responsibility isn't claiming to have it all figured out, but he's saying, I know what's mine to fix, and I don't run from it. That kind of ownership is rare, and that's exactly why it's so magnetic, because we live in a time where it's easier to point fingers than to look in the mirror. It's easier to shift blame on your past, your parents, your boss, your ex, than to face the uncomfortable truth that some part of your situation is a result of your choices or your avoidance of them. And let me be clear, this isn't about self-criticism or shame. It's about power. When you take responsibility for your life, you're not just admitting fault. You're claiming agency. You're stepping out of victimhood and into authorship. You stop reacting and start creating. Women instinctively respond to that. Psychologically speaking, it signals emotional maturity and psychological resilience. You're not waiting for someone else to come fix things or for the stars to align. You are the alignment. You are the initiator, the one who says, I might not have chosen everything that happened to me, but I am 100% responsible for what I do next. That mindset, it's attractive, but more than that, it's trustworthy. Because when a man lives like that, he becomes dependable. He becomes consistent, not because everything is going right in his life, but because he's steady in how he handles what goes wrong. That steadiness builds a kind of confidence that isn't loud, but it's unshakable. It tells the people around him, especially the women in his life, you can count on me because I count on me. And that's what's often misunderstood. Women don't want to fix you. They don't want to babysit your potential. What they respect is a man who's already doing the work. Not one who talks about what he could be, but one who is already becoming through action, through effort, through personal responsibility. It shows up in the small things. Do you take care of your body, your finances, your commitments? Do you keep your word not just to others, but to yourself? Do you correct yourself when no one is watching? That's where character is built. That's where women notice. Because when a man is disciplined in private, it shows in public. And that quiet discipline speaks louder than any speech about goals or ambition. Now, philosophically, this goes even deeper. To take responsibility is to accept that you are not owed anything. That the world is not here to hand you happiness or success or fulfillment. Those are things you build. And in that building process, you become someone worth following, worth believing in, worth respecting. That's why this kind of man stands out. Because he's not looking to be saved. He's not waiting to be discovered. He's already in motion, already becoming the kind of man his future requires. That initiative, born from responsibility, creates gravity. It draws people in. It draws women in, not out of dependence, but out of admiration. Because let's be honest, a man who blames is easy to find. A man who takes ownership quietly, consistently, relentlessly is rare. And rare is respected. So if you're asking what kind of man women truly respect, it's not the one who's perfect or smooth or even wildly successful. It's the one who says, this is my life, and I'm not outsourcing it to anyone. The one who shows up, even when it's hard, even when it's lonely, even when no one claps. Because at the end of the day, responsibility isn't just a burden, it's your becoming. And when you wear it well, you don't need to convince anyone of your value. You just live it.